Hi, everyone. Welcome back along to the show. Today, I have with me Allison Sagraves, who is a portfolio CDO, also explained as a recovering CDO to me a little earlier. I'm delighted to have Allison on the show. We're going to be talking about delivering value and winning ugly. And we also think there's a bit of an inflection point in the data industry. So we're going to cover quite a lot of stuff. I'm going to bring Allison on and let's take things from the word go. So, Allison, welcome along to the show.
Hey, Jason, how are you?
I'm
Good
doing
to be
really
with
well.
you and your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic to have you on the show. Portfolio chief data officer, recovering chief data officer. What does that all mean? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I was the chief data officer, the founding chief data officer for a major bank in the US for 5 years. So I outlasted industry averages in that role. So I did that for 5 years. I left in July of this year to actually take on a portfolio life, as some people have described it. I was doing some teaching at Carnegie Mellon in their chief data officer program. I had some consulting opportunities, and so I decided I would just take a leap, and it's really been fascinating. I've done so many interesting things. It's only been 4 months since I've left industry, and I've been at several conferences, at Carnegie Mellon and other places, and have talked to a bunch of CDOs and data leaders just in the past 60 days. And I'm really trying to just distill where we are at this very interesting point of industry. And also part of portfolio life is just having more fun in my life. And as you can see, this is not a Zoom background. This is my actual cabin. I'm in the woods, and I enjoy being the steward of a forest and being a beekeeper. So I said to Jason, whoever has the most interesting comment on LinkedIn or on YouTube, I will send a jar of my raw honey, which I am bottling, labeling, and delivering today.
Brilliant.
Raw and unfiltered. That's my goal for the day. We'll see if that happens.
Well, hopefully nice and raw and unfiltered for this chat, because I think there's so much to talk about when it comes to delivering value, questioning whether we're delivering value, this idea of winning ugly, rolling up your sleeves and making stuff happen. But it's a juxtaposition with the beauty of the forest and of the bees and of making honey. So now I'm so confused with what angle we're coming at.
Juxtaposition is what I love about life, and trying to connect a lot of disparate dots.
Well,
So one of the things
great.
that I have been really reflecting on as I've been talking to people the past few months is, every year, New Vantage Partners, Randy Bean and company, they put out an industry survey. I've answered the survey for many years. And there were two data points that I thought were really interesting. One was that, something like approximately 75% of people that answered the survey said, hey, yes, we are getting value from our data and AI investments. So I think, that was a pretty high number compared with some previous years. But then later on in the survey, the question was, do you have a data culture? And I think it was something like 19%, like less than 20% of people answering the survey said that they had a data culture. I'm like, well, this is really what does this mean? We've got, 75% of people saying, yeah, we're getting some value, but, we don't have a data culture. So, I've been discussing that idea with, or that data with people in the industry and have some thoughts that we can discuss today.
Well, let's talk about the first part of that then, value, because of course saying that you've delivered value, that could be $1, it could be $100 million, it could be in one department, it could be in all departments. It's sort of it's a bit binary, I guess, in terms of a yes no for it. But so I think that might give us some indication of why there might be a big difference. But what do we have value? Are we delivering value? I mean, you obviously spent a lot of time as a chief data officer, and as you say in your introduction, tenure lasted longer than the average. That tends to mean that some value is being generated, and some benefits being delivered. But where is the most value coming from, and what's really needed to ensure that you deliver value?
Well, I think in certain industries, in my era, for example, being in financial services, a lot of the value initially was on the defensive side. Heavily regulated industries, you have to do a lot with building data foundations and ensuring clean data for regulatory purposes, and there is actual value in that. And actually understanding how to quantify that value is important. And I think that we're not good as an industry in understanding how to quantify value. So I think so I think a lot of people are moving from defense to offense. That's kind of been going on, and I think that we're kind of struggling a little bit in that arena. And interestingly, I was just reading some information from McKinsey, and they were saying that the 10 years prior to the pandemic, revenues of the typical company have only increased 2.8% a year. And so regardless of whether you say you're delivering value or not, all of these investments in technology, all of these investments in data, all of the things that we've been doing are really not making much of a difference on the revenue line, which I think is kind of a startling thing. So there are, a minority of companies, I don't know, 10% or so, that are achieving, real growth. But most companies are really not achieving growth. So kind of regardless of how you measure it, and that's a whole another discussion, I don't think we're getting the returns.
Well, I think it's stark, isn't it? Like there may be some of something creeping in there, which is that it might have been no growth or negative growth without data and technology. It's hard to unpick at that sort of top level number, but I think if we unpick that as a chief data officer, it's you've got to be in a position where you understand the value that you're delivering, even if at the top line level, as you say, the 2.8% growth, even if that's not where the business wants it, understanding below that where the value's been delivered is mega important, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's generally three sources of value. I mean, there's growing revenues, there's reducing risk, and making sure that you quantify that. That's important. Yeah. And then operational efficiency. So that's not baked into that 2.8% number. There could have been a lot more efficiency, and that's certainly where data plays heavily. But it's those three dimensions that you've really got to understand. Where are your efforts achieving a payback? And so. I think that, one of the things I am kind of learning as I speak to some of these CDOs over the past 2 months, especially really across industries, in the most diverse of all possible industries, whether it's pharma, whether it's healthcare, whether it's animal science, whether it's the beauty industry, the consumer packaged goods, financial services. Like, it's really been interesting because I've talked to such a broad array of people. They're doing really interesting things. I think that the strategy at this point is really to figure out where are you really going to get a return by investing in data. So I think and the whole thing about data culture, less than 20% say they have a data culture. I think that there is a bit of I'm starting to question whether this idea that everybody has got to be data driven, like everybody in the organization, we've got to train everybody. I'm really now wondering if we need to focus where we use efforts on things that really matter, on the areas where investing in data is really going to make a difference and drive your business priorities. So I'm almost wondering if we're diluting the impact of value by trying to kind of spread it across the organization instead of really focus our efforts on parts of the organization that really matter. And that's going to depend on the industry you're in and the context of your industry and your competitive position. But I'm not sure that the collective we in the data industry is really promoting this idea of being strategic and focused and really applying your data power to the things that are really going to drive competitive advantage. That's kind of what I'm concluding as I bring all of these various data points and conversations together.
Yeah, there's definitely a kind of theme, which is kind of democratize and get data in the hands of everyone and data literacy for all. And yes, I think everyone has a part to play, but I think you're right in that kind of laser focus on where's most value going to be delivered isn't about focusing on let's train everyone. It's focusing on the thing where value is going to be delivered the most, which is on a business objective that you're trying to achieve. And if you unpick that business objective, where's the decision making being being made? Where does the process start and stop? Where are the blockers? That's where we direct our attention to culture and literacy and training and education and tools and technology and data, not just a capability to the organization across the board for the sake of it. So I think you're right. That kind of like really laser focused attempt at making sure that we're driving our attention in the right place. It's got to be a better way of spending money as well.
Yeah, and it was interesting in having these conversations with CDOs. These were Fortune 100 companies in some cases, very household names in other cases, that we're doing some really interesting things, and they're saying, oh, but we don't have a data culture, and then they would like mention some department that like wasn't automated, and it just made me think like you can't win as the CDO if your objective is like you've got to have automated data processes in every part of your organization. Like that is just a Sisyphean task. I mean, I really think this idea of focus. I think that's what we should be paying attention to, and maybe like shifting the industry a little bit. I'm certainly pro democratization. I did a TED talk on citizen data science. I'm very big on that. But from an investment standpoint, from a business standpoint, really just aligning to where are you going to win? Where's data going to help you actually achieve something important?
Have we got our success criteria wrong, or our kind of overarching objectives wrong? Again, we the industry, from that perspective, because if we're marching towards, if the objective is make sure everyone's literate or everyone, the data culture in every corner of the business, then that's going to drive us in one direction. But if the success criteria is, better than 2.8% revenue growth or whatever the percentage was earlier, then that would drive us in a different direction, I think. So there are measures of success or our own kind of mirror, slightly misaligned with then reality or expectations?
Well, I think the measures of success have to be extremely tightly coupled with the measures of success of the company. And there are measures of adoption and measures of data, literacy and so forth. But I am now, and this is really just new thinking, like in the past week to 2 weeks, that some of this focus on these other metrics of the success of the CDO may actually be at odds with actual business success. That I think that's my new thought. I don't know. Maybe other people have thought this, but
it could be. There's probably something that creeps in there about the expectations that are set by the organization on the CDO or the role profile. So what's the job of the CDO, and whether they're seen as a enabler, sort of support function enabler, or whether they're at the front driving and delivering value.
Yeah, I mean, I think the CDO, I think particularly in regulated industries where the data has got to be really clean, because if you're doing financials, healthcare, those kinds of things, you need somebody in that role to make sure that you've got the foundations, the guardrails, the policies, all that kind of stuff in place to have solid, reliable, trusted data. I mean, that's like kind of non-negotiable for many companies. I think also, having the data leader really work closely with the business on the art of the possible. But I think the shift maybe that needs to happen is the CDO needs to be given a pass on, hey, you know what? Actually, your success is going to be more dependent on the company's success than on, and needs to be given a pass that there's probably a lot of things that they shouldn't be paying attention to. So, in my role, it was always, a joke might be the wrong word, but everything you could argue is a data problem. And so you can easily just drown in the fact that everything is a data problem. But I think just having incredible discipline over what you choose to fix, and having the organizational appetite to be willing to allow things not to be done, and recognizing that this is risk we will accept, and no, your success is not going to be dependent on you fixing everything and all this other stuff over here, but on being very specific and focused on these top 3 to top 5 initiatives. I don't think that I think that's a very deliberate kind of culture, and I don't know that that really exists. That's certainly not the way CDOs that I just have had conversations with. That doesn't feel like how they are being measured or how they assess their own performance on the job. I think that there's this tendency to focus on everything you haven't done.
Mm.
And I think we need to have some permission not to do a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
because I think that might be part of the problem.
Well, or a understanding that it isn't about doing the things; it's about delivering the value. Because
Yes.
if you're
Yes.
managing a program which is do the things, that tends to be implement capabilities, recruit people, build systems, put in processes. That's all stuff. It's all things. It's
Yes.
all it's all building capability. But what's the point? What is the point, and what's the value that those things will deliver? And if we judge against those, I mean, I'm not of course, some businesses are much better at judging performance outside of data teams than others. So it's sort of a bit of the culture of the business of how well are you at judging success, and how well are you at celebrating success, and recognizing achievement will lead into or bleed into the CDO in the same way it will bleed into the CMO and the chief operating officer and the guy that runs supply chain and all the other departments.
Yeah, I think that the idea of celebrating success and really showcasing where you are, where you have these efforts, and sharing them with the organization, sharing what worked, sharing what didn't work, and learning. I think that's really important. And this needs to be, I think there just needs to be. These are business efforts
Yeah,
primarily,
yeah.
and I was at a bank conference, and I was talking about using transaction data to understand what your customer is doing. Typically in a bank, 15 to 20% of your customers are driving 80% of the flows in and out of a bank.
Right.
And these were smaller banks in some cases, but I said, okay, who here is like looking at your transaction data, and who understands who your top 15 to 20% of customers are? And only a handful of hands went up. Now, I mean, this is just fundamental. So this makes me think that, and that would probably not be true of the top banks in the country, but it just makes me think that we're not even doing some of the basic things. Companies have, financial institutions have transaction data. You can understand what your customers are doing. I mean, this is true in any industry.
Yeah.
So sometimes I wonder if we don't focus on just some very fundamental uses of data, and we get tripped up thinking that we need to have all these new things and huge capabilities, when there's some basic stuff where we can start to get real value and have that fund future investments.
There was a securities financial securities company I did some work with years back, must have been 15 years ago, I think. And we jointly, us and the customer at the time, we put this program together to build analytics and insights and a data platform and all the good stuff, all the stuff you need to do. And I remember we eventually got to kind of showcasing what was there, and we had these really cool design dashboards and showing ups and downs and customers and trades and all this sort of thing. It was brilliant, like it's quite state of the art. And the first diagram at the top left-hand corner of this dashboard was a count of customers. It was a count of how many customers they had. And we spent an hour talking about that. They were so excited that they could finally know how many customers that they had and drill into who they were, not even what they did, but who they were. And it was it was literally the basics. And we realized we reshaped the program after that, because we realized how far back they were in terms of what they were able to see today. So it's a sort of a run before you walk problem, I think, in some respects, that we've got this kind of like very high expectation, and we were trying to aspire and to achieve that high expectation. And maybe and this isn't about, I don't think, about necessarily foundations, but it is certainly about basics and iterating towards high expectations, rather than trying to kind of, I don't know, circumvent the hard work of getting ready.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because when you uncover the insights like you just talked about that are very fundamental, I think actually maybe another way to think about data culture is, do you have a culture that is able to make those insights actionable? Because it's fine to uncover who your top 15 to 20% of customers are, but do you have an apparatus in place, a communication strategy, a digital strategy, a strategy with the front line to be able to take those actions and actually act upon them?
Yeah.
So, I think you could incorrectly check a box. Oh, yes, we understand the data, but have you really operationalized the strategy around how you're going to get value from that data?
Yeah.
I think that is like you've got to be able to do that, or it's kind of not. And I think that's a growth opportunity for probably most companies.
I think so, and it's the classic example of an organization wanting a single view of customer, but then not having a customer strategy or a marketing engagement strategy that sits on top of it. That means you can do something useful with a single view of customer. It needs that business strategy to have to pin it against.
Mm-hmm.
So
data culture. I maybe we need to rewrite to be. Are you able to turn that data into actionable insights and then actually achieve value and have it be a much more action oriented culture instead of everybody is producing dashboards?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So it just rounding off this bit about value, actually, because I want to talk about how we win ugly, because of course winning ugly requires you to know what value you're trying to go after, really. I think I hear quite a lot when you talk there, and it's certainly my experience as well, is in order to deliver value, we need to really be focused on prioritizing the things we want to go after, because it's quite hard to deliver value across lots of things at once. And it's also quite good to have some focus, as you were saying, and certainly some of the examples you gave. Are we good at prioritization? The CDOs you've talked to, how good were you at doing it? And is that actually a blocker to value?
Yeah, I think prioritization is really hard. I think I think that there is some maturation in this realm, but I think organizations can't prioritize their initiatives, in broadly speaking. So then take the subset of data things.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard to there's always 100 things you could do, but what are the 2 or 3 that are really going to matter? Like if you're in maybe addressing your supply chain, if you're doing a lot of logistics, maybe that's where you're going to get the most value. Maybe it's identifying your top customers and having a very targeted strategy around that. Maybe if you're a pharmaceutical company, you've got a lot of data that's like dark data that if you were able to access that data, you could speed up the development of new drugs. Whatever it is, it's going to be different in different industries. But I think that I don't think we're that good necessarily collectively, because I think it's hard to kind of articulate now we talk about data products, but what is that data product? Who are the customers of that data product? What are they going to be willing to pay, or what economic benefit is there going to be to making this data product? So I think there's a lot of talk about this move to data products, and I think that's good. But I think the practices around how you really think in business terms about data as a product and its economic value, and before you start making investments, do you have customers for that product? What's the economic proposition? What are people going to be willing to pay? So I think this is in the conversation. I don't think there are a lot of people doing this well. And if they are, please introduce yourselves to us all. I'd love to hear.
Well, my experience on that one, you mentioned it earlier. Actually, I was going to mention it at the time. Is that I think digital native businesses tend to be a bit better at this stuff because they're very product focused people. They are product focused businesses. They have a chief product officer that's in charge of defining products in a way that are understanding the economic value and then building a business around delivery of that product. It's not about data products. It's parts of a website. It's journeys in Spotify. It's, these are digital products, and these could be physical as well, to be fair. But I think those organizations that sort of in their DNA are a little bit more digital and data native think that way first, that their prioritization is a little bit better, and they align people, the whole business, behind prioritizing an outcome, rather than how most other organizations are set up, which is kind of by skill. Data engineers are here, and
Yes.
web specialists are here, and scientists are here, and then you're sort of passing the baton through the functional capabilities. You flip that round and align to kind of achieving an end result for a customer. They tend to be a bit better at prioritization, but I think because most companies aren't like that, I think your statement is right, that it was certainly from my experience, which is that people can find this quite challenging. The other thing, I suppose, as well, is competing priorities at a business level. So you're moving forward on all fronts. You're trying to grow. We're trying to reduce costs. We're trying to move into different jurisdictions, different territories. There's lots of competing priorities. So how, at a business, do we prioritize? That has to reflect in the culture of how we prioritize data products and data work.
Yeah, I mean, on the data product side, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, my experience has been in legacy companies, not in digital native companies. So I think this is a particular challenge in legacy companies, and we're probably this is an opinion statement, but legacy companies are probably somewhere in the awkward teenage phase of
transition,
kind of product transition to products.
Yeah.
And I think once you do that, and once you I mean, ultimately, that's how you can create scale. Obviously, that's what digital companies get figured out. But then prioritization is perhaps less important, because the prioritization occurs in a much more federated, baked into the business unit way. But right now, I think for companies that are earlier on this journey, getting getting some wins on the board, showing the rest of the organization how you can create value, how you can grow revenue, or how you can save money by optimizing some part of the operations, and just really celebrating that and sharing that with the organization so that can be replicated.
Yeah.
I think there just needs, I find people in this business, okay, here's raw and unfiltered. I promised raw and unfiltered.
Go for it.
It's run by I wish there were people that were more interesting that were in this data business, because data is such a fascinating topic. And I don't know why we do not attract people with more curiosity and more passion and just sort of inspirational tone. I mean, that's not to say that everybody needs that. You need a well-balanced team, but I tend to think that there's a missing ingredient of that in this business. You've got you've got your technocrats, you've got your engineers, and they want to build everything. And of course we need these people. We need the worker bees, to use my
honey, yeah.
And then we sort of have raw and unfiltered. We have the data skulls. You can't do that. All the policing mechanism around data. So I feel like we lack that sort of business driven, inspired, passionate. Here's why we need to do this. Here's the value we're going to get. Here's a way we could really serve our customers better.
Yeah.
We need those champions who are inspiring leaders who can bring these teams together and get the ball in the end zone, which kind of gets into the whole winning ugly. I just think we need a little more urgency and I don't know, fighting through obstacles and just working together as a team for something important and the intent to win. I mean, in the end, this is about, you got to win, or why are you bothering?
Why bother?
I feel like that sort of that kind of really just sort of competitive, instinct and like connected to a purpose, connected to a goal. Like I feel like this is kind of like a passionless industry, which
I don't know.
I think is kind of boring. Like who like what people are going to be attracted to that?
Yeah, I mean that's not my experience actually. I think there's a lot of people with the things that you just said. However, I think it's so important that I think people forget that stuff is like really where you drive value. You know, this is about all those things that you said, inspiring people, driving the agenda forward, making this about business outcome, looking at, you know, innovative, rolling up your sleeves and getting stuff done rather than lots of sort of navel gazing. I remember a conversation I had with one of our peers, Cara Daly, on an episode a while back.
Hey, she's one of my buddies.
Right, there we go. This is when she was at Silicon Valley Bank, I believe at the time, and the whole episode, and this is sort of her ethos, was about the hustle of the CDO.
Yes.
And, you know, this isn't a nice, pretty kind of sit on, you know, make stuff happen, chip away. This is like roll up your sleeves, win ugly. And I think to your point there about you mentioned earlier about you got to get in, you got to deliver value, you got to prove that you can deliver value, you can put some money in the till, you can save some money, and build some credibility early on, prove value. You've got to just get stuck in, haven't you? You can't just talk about it forever. You can't just walk around convincing people. You can't talk about what the culture will be like. You got to get it done. You got to just you got to do it.
Right. And I think that so I think that so now I'm feeling somewhat guilty that was like an indictment on the industry. That's not really what I meant. I just feel like the people that kind of bring that like extra spark, that like igniting spark, aren't necessarily valued. I think we over-index on technical capabilities and not how are we going to monetize those technical capabilities. So you need a team, you need people that like bring all of the skills, and we've got to be sure that like we value the multiple roles on the team, and that we make sure we have a quarterback, because you can't play the game without a quarterback.
No, I totally agree with that, in that and it's really easy to value the things like technical implementation, because it's so easy to see and touch and feel and go, well, here's a thing that we built, it's a dashboard, it's a thing, and we built some pipelines, it's quite tangible. Whereas all this other thing is a little bit harder to put a value on in its own right, certainly independently, when you take each bit at a time. But as you say, it's one of the things that allows you, gives you the remit, gives you the ability to deliver value, is all these other things. It's alignment with business strategy, it's engagement, it's collaboration with business teams, it's focusing on outcomes really, you know, importantly. So yeah, totally agree with that point. We touched there on kind of like getting to value quickly, and that is a problem actually for lots of organizations, certainly at scale, like delivering value at scale, where things you know, everything's moving so fast and changing so quickly. So it is you know, delivering value, is this a long game? Is it much more about shorter term, you know, agile focused wins? You know, how do you see in terms of this kind of getting to value, the pace of getting to value playing out?
Well, I think that I think it's my inclination that you get to value, and I don't know where I heard this, but like there's the artisanal and then the industrial approach. I think that you, number one, have to be able to understand how you generate value, and that is initially artisanal. And again, not to like over-index on the honey factor, but like I completely understand how a hive works at this point. I could not be less productive and less effective, but I completely understand it. And now I could completely understand how you could apply technology. Now, of course, it would take all the fun out of it, and why would I even be in the business? But so in other words, I think you need to start at the artisanal level, which we kind of are in many, more in legacy industries. So I think we need to like say it's okay to create value, to not use the most modern data stack in order to like gain some insights on you know, customer base, some of the things that we've been talking about, and then now let's take these insights and let's operationalize them. So I think you've got to understand the business first. Really, really understand that. And so and I think trying to do that quickly, and getting some points on the board, and demonstrating that, yes, there is money to be made by being more analytically driven in your approach to business. I think you need to show that in a way that is clear to the key stakeholders. And then once you're able to do that, and you are able to like rinse and repeat in an artisanal, and I think you need to be okay with being fast, a little bit like imperfect, and not like intentionally scalable at the outset, but in a way that you're learning how you create value. Then I think the good news is that from a scale perspective, it is getting easier to scale because of practices like data products, data ops, all of the methodologies, the policies, the operating models. The standards can be created then at kind of a central level and federated out, and then you can sort of like deploy across the businesses. But I think it's kind of both. I think first, starting out in this artisanal way, I think is okay if you can show that this works, and then that gives the organization some experience to then be able to build a scaled infrastructure that can be used by more people in the organization. So I don't think that they're at odds. I think one is a precursor to the other. And I think that instead of jumping to technical solutions, understanding how the factory works is important first. And then understanding how to really be smart about where you apply technology and how you apply technology. And by the way, those who have maybe been sitting on the sidelines, there are lower code ways to make a lot of this stuff happen, easier ways. I think you can leapfrog a lot of the pain. In an ideal world.
Yeah, it's sort of become it looks easy to buy technology and implement it and make success happen quickly. The marketing of vendors, the stories that you hear from people, it looks quite simple. Buy the thing, implement the thing, all of a sudden you've got value. But I think that's not strictly true, and it sort of tends to be a bit harder and a bit more clunky than you think it's going to be in terms of data and extraction and integration and modeling and rules and all that sort of stuff. But I think we can hide behind that a little bit. And I sort of, just as I think that through, Black Friday's coming up. What do we need to do on Black Friday? We need to make sure we get the right offers in front of the right people. And if I spend the next 6 months trying to build a system and put it in and a single customer view and the best tools on the market, then Black Friday will be finished and I would have missed the chance to make that right. If I can do that in an Excel spreadsheet next month, next week, then I'm ready for Black Friday. So in some ways, I think you have to remember that the objective is to deliver value, not to implement solutions. If you want to do it next year and the year after and the year after that, then of course we need to build something that can scale and you can put it on rails and it has the right guardrails and people understand how to use it. But it's about priority.
Yeah, in fact, I think there's this whole like apologetic factor in the CDO community, and people like embarrassed about how they do things. And so I was actually talking to somebody who worked for a health care company, and she was explaining how she worked very closely with the business, how they really optimized supply chains, took a lot of money out, a lot of cost out of their operating costs. And then I was asking her, I said, well, how did you do that? And she said, well, I'm really embarrassed to say that we used Excel. I said, well, you shouldn't be embarrassed to say you used Excel because you actually accomplished the objective. And then as the conversation unfolded, this was whatever. She was using the work, they migrated to better environments, but like ultimately the work that she started with the business, like hand in hand with the business in Excel, is now being used to help design their modern data infrastructure. So I think that these really like capturing learnings and being like in the weeds of getting the work done positions you to be smarter about how you build your infrastructure. So I think it's less about infrastructure first. It's more about understanding what you're trying to do, repeating it, and then applying automation to industrialize.
After once we know it adds value.
Once you know what you're manufacturing, then you
Yeah.
can apply automation. But you got to understand it first.
And I bet they made loads of mistakes in the Excel spreadsheet, which if you were trying to implement a system at the same time would have been hugely costly, and extensions and overruns. And this way they got to learn and play and figure out and deliver value all at the same time. That then sets the standard to then go and apply to an industrializable platform. So I love it. I love that.
Yeah, and I want to be sure that like it's clear that like I'm saying this all needs to be done with urgency. Like this is not a pass to like, oh, you don't need to do this. It's more like
get there quicker.
Ingenuity, curiosity, like experiment, try, start over, publicize what you're doing, adopt organizational learnings. And then once you have it figured out, then move from artisanal to industrial.
Yeah.
But this is not like, at a whatever, a lackadaisical pace. This is with urgency. I'm just
to your point.
That's what I mean by winning ugly. We need the permission to get the ball into the end zone in a way that may not be pretty, but we understand how we did it. We did it as a team, and we can do it again, and we're going to keep getting better.
You just as start to think about wrapping up. You painted a really good picture about what this industry needed, and the kind of behaviors, I think, more than anything that are really desirable. And help you win ugly, help you deliver value. Do you think then we are building teams like that? Do you think that's what we're indexing on? Is people that they have the appetite to work in that way, are up for kind of, I guess, fighting the traditional, the legacy, or are we in danger of wanting to work that way but actually not really building teams that are comfortable operating like that?
Well, I think that's the way it should be done. I think that it's difficult to do this unless you have an organizational culture that is a strong culture, is a culture that is aligned to a common purpose, that is aligned to winning. And go to Gallup, read about the state of the global workplace. It's kind of depressing. So I think that I think people are starting to get what needs to be in place from a people standpoint, but there's a lot of broken companies when it comes to culture, and I don't think you can have a winning. You can't win at data when you've got a broken culture. So. I don't want to end on that note. That's really depressing.
Let's talk about honey, quick. No, I know what you mean though, and I it's not one for now because it's a whole new conversation. But the sort of when we talk about data culture, really all that means, I think, is that you use data. You've got a culture where data is used to help make your decisions. But what really this is about is a business culture. And the business culture needs certain facets, I think, to be able to use data to help drive its decisions. Things like collaboration, things like innovation, things like pace, things like urgency. Those are business cultural norms and traits and values and behaviors, not data culture traits and values and behaviors and norms. So it's a bit of a you can't look at data culture, if we're going to call it that, and business culture separately. You've got to think about how these things come together.
Yeah, so I mean, putting it in a more positive realm, honestly, I just read the Gallup article 2 days ago. I mean, elections and everything, I'm on the Gallup polls, but I do recommend people read it just to kind of understand like what is the state of the workplace. I mean, it is sobering. It is a sobering study, but I think that it is a call to action to like really address our cultures. And I think if companies with strong business cultures, understanding these data principles, your data, you can be successful with data if you have a strong business culture. So I think it's a requirement to being successful with data, or to be a successful company.
Yeah. Love it. Well, covered so much ground there, and there's sort of, when we talked about the inflection point in the data industry, I think this is bang on it. It's the kind of this juxtaposition I said at the start of value and winning ugly and teams and culture. And it's great that I had the conversation with you. So really appreciate you coming on to the show, Allison.
Well, I just wish everybody would have a little more fun, take themselves a little less seriously, and this is fun and interesting work. So often unglamorous, but it's really, I've certainly had a rewarding career, so I encourage others.
Love it. Well, yeah, as do I, and I appreciate you talking about all of that on the show today. So, thanks to Allison. Thanks everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we'll catch you again soon.